The unit's agenda this year was to question the term addendum in architecture. This began with an obsessive investigation of its manifestation, not what it means, but how it looks and functions in the context of a city. The techniques used to prompt our investigations allowed each of us to tease out specific potential within the term, variations of addenda which became instrumental in driving our own architectural briefs. The unit then travelled to Tokyo, a city whose manic density offered a profoundly incongruous backdrop to our projects in London. But rather than focus on particular aspects or buildings, we approached Tokyo as a holistic system of scales. Back in London, the consequences of these explorations took the form of a year-long project specific to various sites in the city. By definition, an addendum is a reaction to something that came before it, and when applied to architecture, the idea of context becomes implicit. It was therefore crucial for our own brief to draw from a penetrative understanding of the forces at work on our sites. Whether a building, system, or event, we came to understand the addendum not simply as a means to an end, but as a continuous force in its own right.
So my project is called the Center for Public Integrity. It is an addendum to existing monuments of the site of Hyde Park Corner. The public building is at the risk of disappearing from London. So what I am proposing is essentially a monument to the public building that starts to associate with the monuments of this site. It is a bit inaccurate to say that my proposal is an addendum because I don't have any past work to lean on. And what I have done to kind of justify why it is an addendum is that I have, first of all, I've kind of appropriated some citizenship as a Londoner, and I'm arguing that whenever I'm operating in the public space, I can to some extent be credited as an author because I'm on a regular basis contributing and shaping the community that I'm in. So I have some kind of authorship over the public sphere. Kind of second point I'm trying to make why this is an addendum is because it, in its shape and form, this building, this monument to the public, is very much related to research I did in Tokyo in second term, where I looked into a certain typology of small police substations that are kind of omnipresent in Tokyo, and that are more than being police stations carrying out the role of policing, of surveillance. They are signifiers of public space. And they are constant reminders for the Japanese citizens of a thing called public territory. I'm very influenced by the eclecticism of the Koban. So I have this screen here in the back that makes a barrier to the Piccadilly underpass on the other side. Yeah, it's a way of framing this site using buildings, components, yeah, in a collection of monuments that are commemorative of that which is disappearing.
So in Tokyo, I was looking at these billboards on the rooftops of the building, and I call them hats because when you add a hat to a person, can I borrow your hat? So in London, I don't have one specific site, but I just looked into the rooftops, which I then add a hat to activate the existing building, which is very ordinary and it has got no character. But by adding a hat, they become something else. So my addendum is about activating the existing, giving a new meaning. I mean, for instance, like the bakery building, it's in the shape of a cigarette box, and people think, why is the cigarette related to the bakery? And this weird association creates, like, lead people to somewhere else. I mean, my whole project started with the quote from Hawksmoor describing London as an ugly, inconvenient, self-destroying monster. And I thought, it's not really a matter of questioning whether something is ugly or beautiful, but nowadays it's more about if things are worth talking about. So my hat is a device that generates a conversation. But what I found more interesting about them is that because there are so many of them, like the majority of buildings have hats, so they form this group in the city, and the two completely different buildings, I saw two different buildings which had like the same advertisement on their billboard, and I thought, are they somehow related in terms of like what they have in the building? So in a way I kind of did the same in London, where I created not just one hat, but it's a series of it, like so they formulate a link between them because all of them are in the shape of the recognizable product. So these forces are joined together to fight against St. Paul's Cathedral, which is kind of like a king in London. Like it dominates the entire area with its regulations.
Okay, so my site is the Camden Market, mainly Camden Long Market in the Camden, and this is a start point the Camden Market is born. So that's the root of the Camden Market, and I'm focused on the current situation of the market in London. It's like copy and paste, and it's repetitive conditions, so they can exchangeable. So I want to give a specific character for the market. So mainly they disrupt the market character by the stall. So my idea is the removing stall from the market. So removing is one of the key point of my addendum. And make a empty square, which is the star occupied by. And then I replaced the star into the tiny empty space which they didn't use it, so I'm reusing the empty space for the stall. So I'm creating the tower for the stall, which is existing in the Camden side, and also make a square to returning the empty space for the Camden residents. The stall tower actually bring all the market activity just go into the tower. So now mainly London market is a horizontal market, but I make a horizontal market turn into the vertical. So it's a vertical condition, but they clearly has the outdoor market condition, which usually London market has it. So they can feel the weather, like rain, sun, and also they can see the day and night time. And then they can attract the other store in the different floor. So actually they bring all the market condition into it.
My site is Peckham, and it's the enclosure of the viaducts, which encloses the station, Peckham Station, and I'm taking the station as kind of the pulling machine for people to come into Peckham. And at the end I demolished a building that was in front of the station to give the area more space. Which is funny because at the beginning I was finding the difference between the addition and an addendum. So I was always thinking about the addendum as an addition in that sense. But at the end I figured that it's more of a theory, and the result that comes out of it is the addendum. So me giving more space to the people. So I think from the old building that has been there, taking the staircases and forming new connections to the Peckham Core Line, which eventually would then go to Queensway. For example, I had the example of the Reichstag in Germany, where the dome has been renewed, and I see the renewing of the dome as an addendum and not an addition, because it's adding another function to it for people to have another view inside what is happening.
My project is looking at the Crossrail, and in specific I've chosen Bond Street Station as my site, which is sitting parallel to Oxford Street, this new tunnel, 100 metres, sort of sandwiched between the chaos of Oxford Street and Piccadilly Circus. The addendum that I'm proposing sort of is constrained by the initial ground floor plinth. What I'm then altering is simply the program and the architecture that sits on top of that. One of the most important components of this this addendum proposal is the aspect of time and the arrangement of different programs based on their endurance. The two biggest changes of how you move are two different speeds. There's a ramp, which is situated directly next to the escalators that either allow you to enter or exit, and this ramp begins to circulate up through the 7 stories of the building. In addition to this, there's also express cores, which then allow someone who has a particular intention to, for example, visit the cinema directly, or the workstation directly, or something in specific. They are then allowed to move much faster through the space and have to interact with less. And then on top of this, the arrangement of the floors is the express and shorter endurance elements that are programmed to the bottom of the building, because it wouldn't be worth your time to go to the top and then back down, for example, just to get a newspaper or coffee, whereas you would go to the 8th floor to visit the gym, or to go to the nightclub, or to enter the hotel core. So there's this variety of elements that are sort of constrained by elements of time and speed and endurance, and programmed throughout this space.
In Tokyo, I was quite attracted by junctions between different types of infrastructure, and the way these confluences come together, the treatment of these junctions, and the effect it has on the commercial and residential buildings that surround the junction. So my 3 cases are Sangabashi, Ginza, and Shinjuku. My sort of argument for this is that in the situation of conflict typified by Sangabashi, we end up with spaces which are much more generous, whereas in Shinjuku, for example, there's no such thing as a normal level ground plane, and everything, the materiality of the spaces and the nature of the spaces are all sort of normalised. They become the same. So the proposal is an under and overground railway station which serves to activate a true public space on the South Bank. And The station is kind of a singular point where different infrastructural systems collide and produce a large void, a pocket of low pressure on an increasingly dense site. So above is the Southeastern Railway, below is the Northern and Bakerloo lines, and obviously on ground level you have the South Bank itself, or the ground plane. So you have these three different scales converging at one point. You have the national scale above, the London scale below, and on the grounds there's something very local. You have Royal Festival Hall, you have the Shell Centre and the market, etc. The idea is that the status of the public void as an integral infrastructural core, the idea is that is a kind of strategy so that it is therefore inherently resilient to further privatisation and development. The project is moving to this site, which is ambiguous in ownership, and to really activate that lingering sense of publicness, which the South Bank has kind of slowly been losing.
So basically, I'm working with an highway, and what I did is to insert the highway into central London, following the line of Regent's Canal. But the most interesting part is the places which doesn't fit to the canal, because then there's the collisions with the actual city. So in this scale, I start looking at how exactly it affects the city when the collision it collides with the expressway collides with the city. For my design, I wanted to have a continuous shape, so that could create a recognizable element in the city. But I did change it a bit with small arches, which could adjust the place the base actually sits. Well, I think it's a pure addendum. It's something that this insertion could create. First of all, it enhanced the city because it helps the traffic, the time on the road every day, which is a real problem in London. So that's first. Second of it, it's affected in every single scale, in an urban scale, in an architectural scale, and the insertion is just a pure addition to the city.
My site is Oxford Street. I chose it because it was a comparison to the Haramidori Avenue in Tokyo, and it's 2 kilometers long. It's built with shops, as you know. What the addendum does to the site, the purpose of the addendum was to be so different from the site in materiality and form, to be completely different from the host, which was the site. So to be something that could be completely distinguished from the host in that way, and also to respond to an omission to London. So that was the purpose of my addendum. So what the addendum does to this site is to first of all fill a gap, which I think is in London. My mountain kind of responds to the omission that there are no peaks higher than 98 meters in London. And it basically transforms the city and the site as well, the addendum. It blocks Oxford Street completely. The mountain completely blocks Oxford Street. Oxford Street basically doesn't exist anymore. So the site kind of dissolves into the addendum completely. My addendum is so big that it kind of affects the city overall as well. So I can't say that it just changes Oxford Street in a way. It really changes the whole area of London, transforms the city. To me, an addendum is something that's separate from the host. It can be distinguished from the host completely. That's why it's a mountain, because it's so different from the context of London that anywhere it would stand out. You wouldn't be able to say, okay, where is the addition? You know that this is the added part. So I can't say that the buildings around it are additions to the mountain. I think the mountain is an addition to the city completely. I say it dissolves. I think Oxford Street disappears into the mountain completely, but I'm not saying that I'm saying something completely against this, that in no way my mountain blends into the city. It's completely standing out in the city. The mountain represents something that could take you away from the rationalism and materialism of the world. That's what I actually learned from Bruno Taut, that the mountain, he thinks mountain can do that. He's influenced by Nietzsche from that like by taking it, like this drawing is about like taking a solitary journey up the mountain, overcoming the people, overcoming yourself. So I wouldn't say that I necessarily believe that that's how it works and there's a mountain and you'll climb it and you'll overcome yourself, but I think that's a nice way of looking at mountains to imagine. And also I wanted to kind of show how London would turn into a utopia, which is something also that I learned from Bruno Taut, because he took his city into the mountains because he wanted to make it a utopia, and I did the reverse. I brought the mountain to the city to turn it into a utopia.
So my site is located in Notting Hill, that is closed off by the train tracks and the canal, and which actually isolates the whole area and makes it really undeveloped and completely unusable, most of the area. And my addendum is actually the insertions that will bring more attention to the area but still keep its autonomy, which I decided to make through layering out the system, the grid, which eventually developed into a game to position those insertions. So the insertions happen, the addendum actually happens randomly without specific reasoning for it, although the game still controls the ways and positioning of them and brings the reason justifying the addendum to happen. And what is also interesting that these additions rely on the materials and elements that exist on the site, so I'm not taking any other forms but only those ones that are already in this archipelago. And the addendums that I'm proposing for those, they're not really finished ones, they still allow for future development, progression to happen.
My site is in Harrow, and I was dealing with the regeneration of housing estate. It's one of the many housing estates in London that was announced to be demolished. Housing estates in general was a typology that I was dealing with, was my understanding of Addendum. I chose to be my understanding was Addendum as a repair. And council estates as a typology, I believe, is a perfect architectural example to practice this architecture repair on. In this case, my Addendum is very site specific, because why I was very keen on taking this project in Harrow, as of the many houses, there was that I could see that the community living there clearly expressed that they would like to stay. They didn't want to be rehoused, and there was I think it was really worth to fighting, especially for this estate, for the social value, for the sentimental value that it had. And it's quite nice that you brought up like the idea of modular, right? Because I treated my repair was the repair of the concept of a house. So I imagined that each flat, I started designing a flat, not the whole estate, the whole individual flats, and I thought myself that I asked myself what constitutes a house. For me, it was the garden, then it was a staircase, the occupation of spaces vertically as much horizontally, and then it was the front access that is kind of step back from the street, right? So each of these, my flats had to apply these conditions. Addendum as a repair, when I say as a repair, I'm not actually interested that much in the physical repair, right? That would mean filling the cracks. But the repair is more like the new added value. The restatement of value of something that we thought it lost its importance.
So in Tokyo, every building is freestanding and they're independent, so they can be demolished quite easily. So the way they are built, they can choose wherever they want to face, the orientation, and also you can choose how to enter your house. and whereas in London we have all the entrances facing one side. So it's like the transformation of a block makes all the different choices for people, like different ways to enter their houses, and like through time and there will be new building added to the place and like filling in the gaps or something, and then that's the time where we have this addendum moment, and also the new building will communicate, like negotiate with other buildings. So that's what makes Tokyo blocks so interesting, and I want to do the same to London blocks. So we don't really have gaps here between houses. We have party walls. If we imagine London as it was built without party walls, and London will be transformed into another condition, and we have free, like we have independent buildings, and then we have this transformation going on. What I did in these two blocks was I was trying to find a better circulation for people, like from two different sides, and then I was trying to see how to penetrate and how to give them a better path to go through these two blocks. And then I used this as the way to divide the blocks and trying to see how to subdivide it, and then you have like smaller houses filling the gaps, and you have little alleyways inside these two blocks.
Okay, so, well, the site is very specific, and the way how I chose it is directly driven from how the manga cafes were located in Tokyo. So I looked at a site that would be in the proximity of a main working area in London. So my addendum, in a sense, is a new typology of housing that exploits these abandoned buildings. And what it does, it attempts to provide housing units. The idea is for the commuters, and at the same time a communal space which would attract the local society. First, to provide a new ground for interactions between these two different typologies of people, and but the main idea is to glorify this building and give them a new function, such as like a meter and a satellite do. Like that, once they're connected, they activate something more important than the connection itself. But I'm aware that the 8th addition don't solve the problem of housing in London, but they're just, my idea is the addendum should be a message, because this structure, they will clasp temporarily in the buildings, and they will go away in probably 2-3 years when the buildings, when the landlords will utilize this building, destroy them, build something else. If the system I designed would be applied in other circumstances, it could be also clasped on normal buildings. So in a sense, it would be valid for every single typology of building, because the idea is that you preserve the site, the value, all the aspects of the site are preserved, and it's just clasped on top using its infrastructure. Like, my idea is that, like in the Tokyo pole, what happens is that you have a universal structure that can be plugged anywhere, which is the concrete pole, and then the real addition is the elements that come onto it, so which are specific to the site. So in a sense, all the poles appear similar as the same thing, but they're all specific to the site. Some of them will have more transformers than others, more cables than others. So in a similar way, this happens with my addendums. So it's a universal structure that, of course, it will adapt to different typologies of buildings.
But it's modular.
It's modular in a sense, so it would replicate. So it offers the same services. It's like a repeating standard. But well, at the moment, I worked just on roughly on 2 sides. I mean, I worked on all my 8 abandoned buildings, not too much into detail. I worked into detail into 2 buildings. Classic modern building like columns and flat roof. And both have the aspect of having a completely empty partition wall, which for me was kind of very useful, so that I could plug my whole facade. But I'm sure that the interesting part would come now that I developed the system, and what would come after would be how would I adapt this system to more intricate situations, because that would start creating variations in my system, which would create probably more interesting situations between the addition, the site, and this new composition. It shows a new solution for living, so this is like more related to the block, and because it exposes now the life of the building, so it's not more in a derelict condition.